I think a lot of brands probably have an internal brand in place. They maybe don't have it formalized, but short explanation is an external brand. It's what communicates an organization's promise to its customers. So a promise being that foundational value they're committing to. So the kind of the expectations the customer has. So like one example is Geico. They say 15 minutes or less can save you 15% or more on car insurance. So that's the expectation their customers have.
Good morning, everybody. Have you created an effective internal and external brand? Today's guest, Lauren Stewart, owner of Stewart Studio, is a brand strategy expert that knows exactly how important it is to have effective internal and external business brands. Welcome to the 15-ish minute coffee chat. We're talking about internal and external brands and how they apply to small business owners and entrepreneurs on today's show.
Yay! We're so happy to be here today. You did do it. Let's just get this started, right? Selena's had a rough night. Just a little bit of, she took care of a friend in need. Let's just put it that way. And as such, did not get much sleep. So we're going to offer a lot of grace to Selena today. If she stutters or...
I was worried about how I was going to do that intro. Like if you had saw just how we hit the start button today. So Anna is definitely holding up the weight of today's show, but we're going to be good. It's going to be great. I know. I'm excited. John, thank you.
Yes.
Lauren is episode 101, you guys. That's exciting.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but she's the second to last show of this season, which is crazy that we've gone through yet another season. But I'm so excited about our topic today because even being within marketing, this isn't something we talk a whole lot about necessarily. And yet it is incredibly important.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny how when the universe, when you say oh, I'm so interested in a yellow bug to drive, and then that's all you see on the road and you're like, how peculiar. So when we were prepping for this show, it was so funny. There was multiple oh, you know what, we're gonna have a guest. Do you have an internal brand? It was just perfect timing, I guess, really, right?
Yeah, it sparked a good conversation both between us, but also looking at some of our clients and saying, oh, this might really help support some of their things that they're looking to do. So let's just throw in our call to action right now. For anyone that's listening to us right now, or even if you're catching the replay, you can always drop a comment in later. But have you created an effective internal and external brand? And I'm super curious. If you don't even know what that means exactly, tell us in the comments, because that's who this show is for, right? Help you understand what internal brands are and external brands are, how they relate, why they're each important, what they can do for your business, right?
No, I mean, what if you were to even ask, Anna and I don't know. I don't know if we have an internal brand. But this is why it's important to have the questions with Lauren and helping to kind of solidify that and understand it, right? Internal, right?
Right, exactly.
I know. and maybe you do have one, but you don't realize that's what it is. And so maybe separating the two can actually really help you even more effectively run your business, because there are two kind of personas to a brand. Okay, so like Anna mentioned, I'm not on my A+ game. I'm on my A- game. So if I feel like I'm watching the show and forgot that I'm actually co-hosting the show, it's gonna be okay. So Anna, what's next? What is next?
We're going to bring up Lauren's bio, and then we're going to bring up Lauren.
Okay, perfect. Okay, guys. So here is Lauren's bio.
Lauren is a designer, creative director, and founder of Stewart Studio. Her focus is in branding and print design. Shortly after graduating from college, Lauren married a dashing infantryman, and the Army swept her away from Texas for a life of adventure. She survived the sweltering heat of Georgia, navigating the faraway land of Missouri, and relished in the beauty of Colorado. Along the way, Lauren has worked for various design agencies and nonprofits. In her free time, Lauren likes to play tennis, two-step with her hubby, and decipher their toddler's adorable babbling. Being mildly obsessed with her dog, Lauren has also authored and designed a children's book full of colorful illustrations, a silly story, and a lovable pup.
Oh my gosh.
How fun is
I
that?
love that. I'm going to have to tell Lauren that. Well, actually, I'm going to wait. I'm going to ask her if she follows the noodle pug guy on TikTok.
Well, let me bring her up and let's
yeah,
just
let's
that question out there. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Lauren.
So first question of the day, do you follow the noodle pug guy on TikTok?
So you might be shocked to know I don't use TikTok. So no, I don't. I'll have to look him up.
Now, okay. So he Noodle the pug took like the world by storm, and he was an older pug. We brought his energy onto the show one day, but so he was older, and so his owner, his human bestie, would say like, is this gonna be what was it, a noodle day? Or there was two terms that he used, and one was like, if he stood up because he's old and he could walk like for the morning, it was gonna be like a good day. If he didn't want to get up, it was, but I mean, everybody fell in love with him. He sadly has gone over the rainbow bridge, but they created like a wonderful children's book, and it was just about like Noodle. And so anyway, yeah, I mean, you'll love Noodle. You'll fall in love with Noodle and his as human bestie. But okay, today's not about Noodle. It's about Lauren. But thank you for being here. And we usually love to start with our guests with a coffee cup selfie. So if you have a mug, a water, we would love to have you hold that up, and we're just gonna like pretend that there's a photographer there. But 1, 2, 3. Okay. Ooh, let's see. I think I can do that. Okay. Excuse me. My dog is trying to catch like a cumbersome fly that has flown in, and it's like the funniest thing. So if you see a dog fly through the air behind me, because she's like moved her. Okay. Anyway, let's get us in position here, and we're gonna just jump into the first question.
Yeah.
So let me go like this, and let me go like this, and we're like, Lauren, welcome to the show.
Yes, front and center, Lauren. So our first question today is really about what the topic is all about, right? I mean, we had this great comment that said internal, right? And I think that's most people's reactions when we're talking about internal and external brand. So can you start by telling us what is the difference between internal versus external branding, or even what are they, right?
Sure. So I think a lot of brands probably have an internal brand in place. They maybe don't have it formalized, but short explanation is an external brand. It's what communicates an organization's promise to its customers. So a promise being that foundational value they're committing to. So the kind of the expectations the customer has. So like one example is Geico. They say 15 minutes or less can save you 15% or more on car insurance. So that's the expectation their customers have. Your internal brand is what drives the efforts that influence that external brand. So mostly we're talking about getting buy-in from your employees and your stakeholders and having them on board. So the two should work together. Hopefully there's kind of an inside-out approach to branding so that everyone internally is on the same page, communicating in the right way externally. So it's kind of a basic breakdown of everything.
Got it. Okay. So I love that. I'm going to ask this really quick because just kind of a very basic what you said. So it's the effort that drives your external brand, the buy-in from your employees and stakeholders to make what you're promising your customers happen.
Right.
Yeah. What a great, can I ask you this too? When you say it like that, I'm like, oh, would that also be like a company culture? It would kind of be like,
yeah. So the values, the purpose, the culture that drives the organization all of that falls into internal branding. So yeah, you need everyone internally to embrace the values and the purpose and the culture and to be on board with it and to actually believe in it, or else whatever you communicate externally, it's not really going to hold any weight.
Right. Like you're like, hey, we love sunshine, and they're like doom and gloom employees.
If they don't fit your customers buy into it.
Right. Okay. No, I love that because I think that kind of helps me reframe. You know, when you hear other terms and you're like, oh, it just means this. And now you know what I mean? You can really kind of compartmentalize them in the right places.
Yeah.
You
like
know what
narrow down the components, right? Which flows perfectly into our second question, which is, can you tell us what are components of a successful internal brand, just to help again formulate what that is in your head?
Sure. So I think anything that gets you that buy-in from your employees and stakeholders, so anything that gets them on board. I think the main components to do this are direction and motivation. So kind of to break those down, to give them direction, to know what the brand stands for, to understand the brand vision. And to do that, you're going to have to communicate that across the whole organization, to your executive team, to your functional teams. And it should look a little different how you communicate that, because the way they communicate externally is going to look a little different. So you got to tailor that properly. And then you need to give them some motivation to actually care to deliver on the brand promise. So they need to learn about it. They need to believe in it. They need to live it so that they can advocate for the brand externally too.
Oh, I love how you say advocate for the brand, right? Like that's an important part of internal branding, I would say, is just if everybody is on board, I mean, you're going to totally advocate for the company that has employed you or the business that you've built along with your team. Like, oh, I love that. And again, I think what I love is because I was like, oh, is there two, like we are doing it. We just don't realize what it's actually called.
Yeah, that's usually the case. You just don't have terminology for those things, but you have some of that in place. It's basically good leadership and, pulling everybody together. So I think in some form of another, you're probably already doing it.
No, I love that.
So what happens when you don't effectively give your message then to your employees? Like what happens if you cannot effectively communicate that? Like you might know what you want, but what if your employees don't really care? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like what happens at that point to your internal brand, and how is that affecting what's happening on the outside for your company?
Yeah, there's definitely downsides of them not understanding or believing in the brand vision and purpose. So if they don't understand it, they might be wasting time focusing on ideas or on programs that are off brand or that might be inappropriate to the brand. Not, bad per se, but it just doesn't really fit. And if they're not believing in it, they're not going to find meaning or fulfillment in their day-to-day. So they're not going to be brand advocates. And like you said, if you're advocating for sunshine and you're doom and gloom, it's going to negatively affect the interactions your customers have with your brand. And that's going to, kind of ding your brand each time that they interact with somebody.
We have a really good question that just popped in. So how does a mission statement and an internal brand differ from each other?
Yeah, I think the internal brand is kind of the umbrella, and within that, a lot of companies have a purpose statement or a vision statement, a mission statement. So a mission statement is really just one small piece of that internal brand. So that's a tricky part of companies communicating all of those little pieces properly to their stakeholders, to their employees, so that the internal brand as a whole is kind of going in the same direction for everybody. So it's just a small little piece of it.
So when you're working with a client, if you're working with a client as a branding expert and you see a shortfall in kind of maybe the way their internal brand is being messaged within their company. Is that like one of the main steps that you need to kind of rectify before you can have a really good external brand? Or are they completely separated enough that you can, focus on external branding and work with maybe a less than internal brand that's not?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important to have your foundation, your internal brand good to go and in place before you can be successful, interacting in the market. Or it's just, you interact with so many brands on a daily basis, and if you get kind of a poor engagement or interaction with a brand, it's going to turn you off immediately. So you have such few chances to kind of get started with your employees interacting with your customers. So you want to have the internal piece right before it can drive the external piece of things.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, Lauren, I'm going rogue and I'm asking a extra question. Is there been something that a client has been surprised about in the process of developing an internal brand, like with you? Like, have you seen kind of like oh yeah, this comes up a lot, or maybe even just like an interesting point without, obviously divulging the client, but just an interesting part of the process that they found with the internal branding?
I think with the internal, oftentimes companies are surprised with how they might view themselves versus how customers actually view them. So, that's when you can get into some research and user testing and all that kind of stuff to actually get some hard data and some feedback, because a lot of companies might have an inflated view of how they're perceived, or maybe they even think the customer's focusing on something different than they really are. So that's probably it can be the most surprising factor, I would say.
But isn't that external brand though, what the customer focuses on? I
think to kind of put them together, they might have originally built their internal branding, their focus to reach their customers in a certain way, and it's not effective. It's not working. So that has to kind of be rethought.
Got it.
Yeah, that almost makes sense. Like when you say that, how, we do usually come in with like, I'm here, and you're like, they're really here, but I can see how like when you're showing that client, hey, no, you're really here, and this is really how your internal staff feels about, the company too. Working on developing a stronger internal brand can really help elevate that external brand, right? Like,
right. Yeah, they definitely feed into each other for sure. Yeah. They look different, the strategies, but you can't separate them either.
Right. Do you feel like they're like, when you get to that point, like I guess if clients are wanting to develop, right, they're open to receiving the feedback, right?
Hopefully. That's not always if they're paying somebody for that big of a change, they're trying to be more open to those things.
So we had another question come in from our listening audience. It's from John again. He asks, are internal brands transparent to the customer and client, or is it supposed to be less obvious? Is it kept internal only? Is it something you're sharing?
Mostly an internal brand is, it's what your employees and stakeholders or internal stakeholders are going to see, and that's what but they're going to see pieces of it. Like they'll see things maybe like the mission statement or the purpose statement or those little things. But as a whole, driving your employees to learn and care about the brand vision internally is going to be something that they primarily see. And then the way that's communicated externally might look a little bit different. Or maybe they're not exposed to all of it.
So I'm gonna go rogue like Selena and ask one extra question also. So how do you know if your internal brand is working? Like what are going to be your what's on your checklist of saying, okay, we've hit these marks, that means this is functioning well for us?
I think some possible signs of success for that are your employees are more motivated, like we talked about, so they might help discover or implement new creative ideas or programs that benefit the company. They have their lane they know that they are supposed to stay in, but that also kind of gives them room for where they can be exercising initiative. And so that's I think a big positive result if things are successful with your internal branding. I think another one could be them, like we said, advocating for the brand. So maybe when they're out and about, not even at work, they believe in it so much that they're talking about it. They're, excuse me, they have influential communication. They're talking positively about the brand and advocating for it outside of work. So I think those are a few signs that things are working well.
No, I love that. Great road question, Anna, because I think everybody wants to know like a benchmark or, you know what I mean? Like something to look for. But I could imagine like if your internal branding increases, you would see it like, right? Like that company culture per se would be more alive and motivated.
More energetic.
Right. Yeah.
Happier employees, I think.
Yeah. No.
So when you're a solopreneur, you're really just talking about yourself at that point. Are there different things that you would want to be thinking about or doing when you're a solopreneur? Maybe don't have a team or your team are contractors that are as actively engaged as you're paying them to be, basically, right? At some point.
Yeah, I think having some basic guidelines. If I were to hire someone to write me some blog posts for my website or something, I would want to have some kind of internal branding guidelines in place so they know the personality of the brand, the overall purpose and vision, so they're not writing in a voice that doesn't sound like my brand. So I think there's some guidance you can still provide as a solopreneur for sure.
Anna, I love that question because when you think about it though, right, that internal branding, if you're just working with contractors, it's how you make them feel when they work with you. So when they leave, they're like, I love when I get a project from Selena or Lauren, like it, and it almost becomes like that kind of trickle effect of like an internal branding with non-employees, but people that you work with, right? Like,
yeah, because they still ultimately are going to speak positively or negatively about you and your company, right?
Yeah.
Whatever their experience is with you as a contractor.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as an employee in that sense. I mean, if you have employees out there going, I hate my job, right? That's going to be, and that's going to be terrible for, well, why? Oh, my boss is a jerk, or my boss is this, or my boss is that, or I don't like the way they do this, right?
Yeah.
I think it also just really speaks to making sure that you have an environment where communication is key, right? Open door policy, that kind of thing, but also welcoming input. And that does definitely, Lauren, go back to what you're talking about, the kind of leadership that you have within your company. And even as a solopreneur, we talk about this a lot, they're like, how do you be a leader when you're only a single person? Well, this is part of that, is welcoming feedback, welcoming engagement from the people that you are working with, whether they be contractors or, even like a mentor or a coach that's helping you work through business ideas. So,
right.
No. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to stop with the road questions and ask our last real question that Lauren knows we're going to ask.
I know. So this is going to be like a complete shift in like conversation. We're moving off of kind of that internal branding and moving a little bit to external branding. One of Lauren's specialties is working on logos. So Lauren, can you tell us, external branding wise, what is it that makes a great logo?
Sure. Yeah, I work on logos a lot. Just the purpose of a logo, first of all, it should identify, so it should tell the consumer what company they're interacting with, what product or service they're buying, and it should give them some insight into the brand's values or personality. If you go through lists of what makes a good logo, there's, usually like 5 to 7 things, but these are my 5 that I could go back to. So one is that a good logo is simple. It's easy to recognize, remember, you can identify it real quickly. So, Nike, Apple are good examples of that. The second one is that it should be relevant or appropriate to the brand. So it should kind of speak to your target audience. It should fit your brand purpose, your values, your personality. So like Chanel, for instance, you can kind of tell right away, like this looks, elegant and luxurious and nice. So it just fits well with Chanel. Excuse me. The third one is it needs to be memorable. So if you don't make a strong impact in a customer's mind, they might remember your product or service, but they might not connect it back to your brand. So having a memorable logo is always helpful. Timeless. We don't want to follow design trends because they are always changing. So while, there's lots of cool psychedelic funky logos coming out right now, and they're really fun and neat, but will it last? I don't know. And then it needs to be versatile. So it needs to work with print media, web, different scale, that kind of thing. So I would say those are the top 5.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, some of the things that you had mentioned is, it's not just, you really do have to think of all those components, right? Like when you are having a logo developed, or if you're trying to DIY it, you still need to kind of look at all those things. I'd love to ask Lauren, have you ever stumbled upon anybody's logo and you're like, oh, it's so atrocious that you're like, hey, can I just give you a little feedback just to make an improvement? Like, have you ever, you know what I mean?
It's so tempting. I see ones all the time. I'm like, man, I really just want to do it like for free and give it to them. It's so bad. But no, I mean, some people with logos like that, they don't think they're bad. They're special to them for some reason. Maybe, maybe they did it themselves or whatever. So unless they really want help, it's not really, it doesn't usually get anywhere unless they go find a designer and they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
You just mentioned an important part of how an owner feels about their logo. It is almost like an emotional, like, I birthed this baby. Like, I love this, like 1924. No, those are cool fonts. So let's go like 1982 font, like on the original Apple Macintosh, like that had the organ
Pacifico as your font.
Okay, like just for funsies, real fast, Lauren. What is the font that you absolutely just like makes your eye twitch, like when you see it? Like, is there a font that bothers you?
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
Trajan Pro is probably my top one. It's the one that's known for, they used it for Avatar and they kind of modified it some. Comic Sans, those are 2 basic ones that most designers hate.
Comic Sans, I love that. They're like, that's the one that's got all the jokes about what are we in kindergarten, kind of like,
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's funny. Okay, we said font. Let me ask you another part of what element like bothers you when you see it? Like, is it kind of so overused or overplayed? And it's definitely not digging. So if anybody's watching, you have this as part of your logo. It's just a question.
Just an opinion.
An opinion of Lauren's.
Just an opinion. So I have seen this done well on occasion, but typically it doesn't work well when you try to fit some kind of shape in place of a letter in a word. So instead of having like the logo mark here and the word underneath, it'll be some coffee shop with the word moon in it, and one of the O's is a moon shape with a cow. And I typically don't think that works very well, especially for scale. So I would advise against it.
That's it. It's always so interesting, like hearing the different, I don't know. I love it because, like I said, this is not what we do, but it's always interesting to hear what logo creators, how they feel. I tell you what, and I know you said you're not on TikTok, but one of my favorite TikToks is like, I love watching like when they'll do like a logo creation video and it's like sped up. So obviously their 1 week is done in like 30 seconds. But it's always so fascinating to watch like kind of the evolvement where I don't know your process, but it just seems like everyone is like the name and then the industry and trying to figure out how that all is. I don't know.
There's a lot of pieces, and depending on your process, it can take quite some time to get it right.
Yeah. Right. I think it's interesting because logos, I think, really are a reflection of the owner, the person who wants to build the brand, right? So, so a lot of times in their heads, they're thinking, I love this. And you're thinking, this doesn't work for your audience, right? And that communication, again, this is that external branding, that external communication outward. But I feel like it also has to do with that internal communication. This is where it's so important to like make sure you're getting that feedback, right? Again, even as a solopreneur, reaching out to people and saying, does this fit my brand? And if people can't tell you what your brand is, that's already a problem, number one. But problem number two then comes with, if you're not asking that feedback and it's only a reflection of what you love, you might really be missing the mark.
Definitely. And that's a really tough part of design, is getting usually the CEO or the stakeholders on board with the direction, because like you said, sometimes what they think they want outweighs the logic and the data. That's just their heart that wants to keep that old, kind of bad logo and just kind of fix it a little bit. And it's really not the best option, but it's what they want. So I'd say that's probably the hardest part, is convincing them of the right business, their strategy that ties into their business strategy. That can be difficult. Yeah, that can be quite stubborn.
No, yeah, gosh, I mean, just you saying that, right? I think about it is there are going to be those clients where it's like, okay, the percentage of emotion tied into that logo is like this, right? And then there's some like, yeah, just whatever works.
Personalities for sure. And you got to be careful, because they know their business best. They started it, they built it. So I never ignore their feedback, even if I disagree with it. But yeah, that's just a tricky thing to navigate.
Oh yeah. My gosh. That's great. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for that information. I love this conversation. Just like it's I think it's just good to sit and reflect for just a moment. Like, if you take a minute, to anyone who's listening right now or catching the replay, right? It's that question of like, what do people say about my brand or my business, both inside my company and outside my company? And are they congruent with each other? If your employees hate working for you, but people like your brand, you're lucky, I think, because eventually that message of, I hate working for this person, will get out, right? Like, don't you think? Like,
yeah. I almost feel like you're doing something right? Yeah. Like, if as the leader or whatever, if your company culture, your internal branding is meshing, then you're doing something right. Like, high five to you if you are doing that. You know what I mean?
Yes, totally. Absolutely.
No. Lauren, I thank you for like kind of sharing a little bit, like, you know what I mean? Like, of kind of the difference. Cause I think now I feel very confident how to explain it. And I feel confident, like, oh, okay, this is what this is. And is this how you want your company to be perceived as a leader? Is this how you want your internal team to feel, about the brand that you've created? Gosh,
well, good.
Great questions.
Yeah.
So Anna, I'm okay.
Our toolkit.
Yes. Yeah. Having said that, I'm gonna pull this up, and I'm curious, like, your thoughts on this. Hold on. Let me go here. Yes. Okay. So because we talked about logos, and that took us down like a design kind of like, hey, let's just share what's in our toolkit. And, there's obviously different levels of expertise here. I would imagine Lauren is definitely an Adobe Illustrator kind of gal. Yeah.
That's global expert for anyone that's not aware.
Right. But these are some of the tools that we love and that we know that of people that we've been, excited to talk with. These are some of the products they use when designing. Canva, Illustrator, and then I believe Adobe Creative Express used to be Spark, and it's kind of like Canva's competitor, like they're equal in what they kind of offer for the less experienced designer. Is that right, Lauren, since you are an Adobe product user? Would that be correct in me saying?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, no, like how like Adobe, I figure you're an Illustrator user, but the Adobe Creative Express used to be Adobe Spark. And I believe the two, Canva and Adobe Spark, are very competitive in like right? Yeah.
To be honest, I don't use either of those often since I use Illustrator primarily.
Right.
But I think you're right. I think they're pretty competitive.
And I do love watching, I love, like, I do use Illustrator, but I know I don't have the patience in my head sometimes, like, to lock it down. And I haven't learned the A through Z. I feel like I've learned like A and then a T and then maybe an R. You know what I'm saying? But I do love when like I was mentioning those videos, I love watching just the different artboards and how they set themselves up and how, like, when they are developing the brand guide within Illustrator, I don't know, I love the whole thing. So yes, this is what we recommend. And we did link to these so you can learn more about it. If for some reason you've never heard of any of these, on our blog, Anna is like putting it down there in that little thing that goes by.
I did. I went ahead and it's in the comments, a direct link to the blog that deals with our conversation with Lauren, the toolkits, and all the ways you can connect with Lauren, which we're going to do next. Or you can just find us at annaandselena.com/blog and see all of them.
Yeah. So, okay, moving on. So, Lauren, tell everybody where they can find you, where you like to hang out. It's not on TikTok yet, guys. So don't find her there.
It's funny being in the design industry. I'm not a huge social media fan, but I am here. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I have my own website. So I'll communicate through any of those channels. I don't to be honest, I'm not super active on any of them. I'll look at stuff, but I don't post too much. But I do like to network and communicate. So please reach out on those channels.
Can I okay, wait. This is a total question. Rogue again, Lauren. I'm going to come back. Wait, hold on. I want to put our faces up. Where do you find your inspiration when you're designing? Where do you go for inspiration?
So that is primarily what I use social for. On Instagram, I follow a lot of designers and agencies that I really admire. So that's a big one. There's also some blogs I really like. There's one called Brand New, and they review logos every day, like big logo redesigns, and I love their stuff. It's really fun to read through those. So that's
interesting, right?
Okay, yeah, I know what I'm gonna be doing. Like, not maybe right after the show. I think I'm gonna go take a nap, but
you'll go down some rabbit holes. So save some time.
Okay. We will be sure to add that in the show notes so that if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can kind of click over and we're going to pop that in because I think it's important to have inspiration. And I know you said something there. So, okay, sorry. Back to our regular programming, whatever. I'm going to pop us back into, I'm just moving so slow today, guys. Okay. All right, Anna.
So our tip jar today comes from Carolyn Beasy, who is a CPA. And Carolyn says, this is a tip for transitioning a retirement account from a former employer to a new job. So have you considered what you'll do with your retirement accounts? If you're investing in a company-owned, company-sponsored 401k at your previous place of employment, you have a few options. 1, roll it over within 60 days. 2, roll it over to an IRA within 60 days. Or 3, you may be able to leave in the money in your account as is if the plan allows it. If you don't deposit within 60 days, however, you can face a 10% tax penalty plus federal income tax on the full amount if you are under 59 and a half years old. So this is the kind of stuff you don't think about until it happens, which is why we love to throw something out for our tip jar that maybe small business owners and entrepreneurs aren't necessarily thinking about. So if you are looking to become an entrepreneur and you're ready to drop out of your 9-to-5 or full-time gig, and this is something that you may want to just take note of, and you can always reach out to Carolyn Beasley at that Instagram account right there for more information and support in this area.
I will tell everybody I did number 2. Oh, that sounded weird. Like that was not intentional, guys. What I meant to really imply was I rolled it over in an IRA to an IRA when I got married to my military service member, and we PCS from Hawaii, and I left my 20-year restaurant job and headed to, Fort Polk, Louisiana. But it was, you really do just have that certain amount of days and to roll it over. And it's been great. It's a little scary though, I will say, right? Like just watching your numbers going up and down and seeing how it goes. But thank you, Caroline. Okay.
Okay, so guess what? We are at the end of our show. I am super excited to say that next week's guest is Ben Williams. Ben is, he is a colleague of Selena's. I have as yet to meet him, but I'm super excited to do this. He is a composer and a brand strategist. So I love that we're having this internal, external brand conversation. And then next week, we're going to go over and we're going to speak with Ben more about harnessing your voice and the power of your storytelling and your ability to really do that messaging more effectively. And so I'm super excited to have him on as our guest. It is going to be our final show of this season, and then there will be a summertime mini break before we come on back with season 11 of the 15-ish minute coffee chat.
So crazy. Let me just pop our faces back up. But Lauren, thank you so much. Like, we totally appreciate the conversation and the information, and we know that people listening or hearing, that is same, hearing and listening is the same thing. You guys, I'm telling you, lack of sleep really just kind of messes with, I say that, but I really actually still have a funny inability to speak sometimes, whether I've had 9 hours of sleep or 1.5 hours of sleep. So Lauren, we are really excited. We are grateful. That's what I meant to say, that we've had you here today. And, guys, we'll see you next week on the next show.
That's right. Thank you for joining us and have a great time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.